They thought they'd won. Standing there in the pastel nightmare of my niece's birthday party, they thought their vicious attack on my daughter was the final victory. My sister, her face twisted in a smug sneer. My mother, her eyes cold and approving. My father silent, which was the same as being complicit. They saw the shock and horror on my face as I held my sobbing child, and they mistook it for defeat. They didn't realize it was bait. The perfect, irresistible bait for a much larger, more patient trap. A trap that would cost them their sterling reputation, their hoarded money, and finally, their freedom. They started a war, but I was going to be the one to end it. My whole life, I'd been a professional at swallowing my own tongue. As the elder daughter, I was the responsible one, the built-in shock absorber for our dysfunctional family. My younger sister, Amelia, was the star of the show. She was charming and bubbly, and she had a terrifying talent for weaponizing that charm. From the time we were little, she learned the world bent to her will, and our parents were her biggest fans. If Amelia wanted my toy, it was handed to her. If Amelia failed a test, the teacher was unfair. My A grades barely got a nod. This just got worse as we got older. I built a quiet, stable life for myself. I became a project manager, married a good man who passed away far too young, and poured all my love into our daughter, Lily. My life was modest, but it was mine. Amelia's life was a performance. She married a wealthy man, not for love, but for the lifestyle. Their house was a palace of beige and gold, their kids were paraded around in designer clothes, and their social standing was my father's proudest achievement. My dad ran a construction company he'd inherited from his father. He worshipped appearances, and Amelia was his high priestess. My existence, and especially Lily's, was an inconvenience. We were too normal, too real. For years, it was death by 1,000 paper cuts. I'd be accidentally left off a dinner invitation. My mom would give me backhanded compliments, like how brave I was to raise a child alone on my salary. Amelia would helpfully point out that Lily's clothes were from a department store, her voice dripping with pity that was really just contempt. I played the part they gave me, the grateful, poor relation. I smiled through the insults because I wanted Lily to have grandparents and cousins. I thought exposing her to their toxic version of family was better than no family at all. What a fool I was. I was so busy keeping the peace, I didn't see that I was serving my own daughter up on a silver platter for their egos. Every time I let an insult slide, I was teaching them that they could get away with it. I was enabling the horror that was about to happen. The breaking point came on a sunny Saturday afternoon at my niece Chloe's 8th birthday party. The theme was Enchanted Garden, and Amelia had turned their massive backyard into a fairy tale scene, complete with a pony dressed as a unicorn. It was a monument to excess. My sweet, gentle Lily, who was 10, was so excited to be there. She loved her cousins and was completely blind to their parents' condescension. She wore her favorite dress, a simple blue sundress, and had spent the morning weaving colorful friendship bracelets into her long, beautiful brown hair. She looked like a little sunbeam. For the first hour, things were okay. I hovered, trying to deflect the usual passive-aggressive comments. My mother made a big show of straightening Lily's dress, sighing as if the cotton fabric was personally offensive. My father was loudly talking about his company, pointedly ignoring me. Then came the cake. The kids were all gathered around the table. Chloe was showing off a new, expensive locket. Lily, in a moment of pure admiration, just reached out to gently touch it. "It's so pretty," she whispered. Amelia saw it. Her fake, perfect mother's smile vanished. "Lily, don't touch that. Your hands are probably sticky." Lily pulled her hand back like she'd been burned. I felt that familiar heat of shame and anger, but before I could say anything, it got worse. Chloe, just parroting her mom, chimed in, "And your hair is messy. You're messing up the pictures." That was Amelia's cue. She moved like a predator. "She's right. What is all this junk in your hair?" She grabbed a fistful of Lily's hair and yanked her head back. Lily cried out. "Hold still," Amelia hissed. "We're trying to have a nice party here, and you come looking like a street urchin." Then my mother, my own mother, stepped forward. For a crazy second, I thought she was going to stop it. Instead, she put her hands on Lily's small shoulders and held her in place. "Amelia's right, dear. Let your aunt fix you up. Don't make a scene." My world just stopped. I saw Amelia walk over to a gift table where a pair of craft scissors lay next to some ribbons. She picked them up. The blades glinted in the sun. She walked back to my daughter, my child, who was now trembling and pinned down by her own grandmother. "We'll just snip these awful things right out," Amelia purred. She raised the scissors. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a thought. It was a roar that ripped out of my throat. "Get away from him, my daughter." I launched myself across the lawn, knocking over a stand of balloons. I shoved my mother away from Lily with a strength I didn't know I had and grabbed Amelia's wrist, twisting it until the scissors clattered onto the grass. The entire party went silent. Everyone was staring. Amelia stared at me, not with remorse, but with pure rage that I had dared to challenge her. "How dare you?" she spat. "You are ruining Chloe's party." I didn't answer. I just scooped up my sobbing, terrified daughter and held her tight against my chest. I looked at them. My sister, clutching her wrist, looking at me with pure hate. My mother rubbing her arm where I'd pushed her, indignant. And my father standing by the patio, his face full of disappointment. Not in them, in me, for making a scene. I walked away without another word, carrying Lily through a sea of staring guests. As I got to the gate, I heard my father's voice, cold and final. "You've gone too far this time, Clara. You've embarrassed us all." That was it. The years of swallowing my pride burned away in that one awful moment. As I buckled Lily into her car seat, her little body still shaking, I looked back at the house. They were already regrouping, turning me into the hysterical villain. They felt no guilt, no shame, only victory. And in the chilling calm that washed over me, I made a promise to myself. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. I wouldn't get angry. I'd get even. I would dismantle their perfect world, piece by piece, using their own tools. Deceit, manipulation, and zero mercy. The first few days were a blur. Lily was traumatized, waking up from nightmares, suddenly afraid to leave the house. My first instinct was to do things the right way. I took pictures of the red marks on Lily's shoulders. I wrote everything down. I went to the police. The officer was polite, but you could tell he was dismissive. "So, your sister tried to cut yarn out of your daughter's hair?" he asked. He called it a family dispute and handed me a pamphlet for counseling. Lesson number 1, the system isn't built to fight this kind of quiet, psychological cruelty. Meanwhile, my family launched their attack. My phone blew up with texts and voicemails. Not apologies, but accusations. I was unstable. I was jealous. My mother left a tearful message about how her arm was bruised. My father sent one text. "You are not welcome here until you apologize." They were gaslighting me on an industrial scale, and for a second, it almost worked. But then I'd look at Lily, huddled on the sofa under a blanket, and the cold, hard certainty would come roaring back. An apology would just tell them they could do whatever they wanted to us. My anger cooled into something else, something patient, methodical. Revenge wasn't going to be one satisfying confrontation. It was going to be a project, my most important project ever. I'm a project manager. I handle timelines, resources, and risks. I was going to apply those same skills to the systematic destruction of my family. My father's company, Henderson and Sons Development, was the source of all their money and status. My grandfather had built it on integrity. My father, he was more interested in looking successful than actually being successful. I knew from years of listening to them that Amelia's husband, Mark, who worked in finance, was deeply involved in the company's books. That was my way in. I couldn't just ask to see the books. I needed a legal reason. I thought about my grandfather. Dee told me once that he'd set something aside for me and Lily in his will, tied to the company. My father had given me a tiny inheritance, and I'd never questioned it. Until now. I found a lawyer, a quiet, older guy named Arthur Vance. I told him everything. He didn't offer sympathy. He offered a plan. We would petition the court for a formal accounting of my grandfather's estate. As a beneficiary, I had the right to see the books. It was the key I needed. The second my father was served with the petition, my phone rang. "What is the meaning of this? Are you suing me?" he yelled. I stayed calm. "I'm just clarifying Grandpa's will, Dad. It's just paperwork." We both knew it was a lie. It was the first move on the chessboard. While that was happening, I hired a private investigator. Her name was Lena, a former forensic accountant. Her target, Amelia, I wanted to know everything. Months went by. The legal battle was a slog. My father's lawyers tried every delay tactic in the book, but Arthur was relentless. Then Lena's reports started coming in. Amelia was having an affair with a tennis pro at their country club. She was also a gambling addict, losing tens of thousands on online poker. No wonder she was so obsessed with money and status. She wasn't just cruel, she was desperate. Lena got me encrypted photos, chat logs, everything. The big breakthrough came when Arthur finally got the financial documents. They were a mess, deliberately confusing. I spent nights at my kitchen table with a highlighter, poring over them. And then I found it. A shell corporation, Apex Holdings. Huge, regular payments were going from Henderson and Sons to this company for consulting services. I gave the name to Lena. She discovered that Apex Holdings was funneling money directly to Amelia and Mark to pay for their mortgage, their cars, their country club fees. But it was so much worse than that. They were committing fraud. My father's company would win a public works contract, inflate the costs, and funnel the extra millions through Apex Holdings. They weren't just embezzling from the family business, they were stealing from the city, from taxpayers. The final piece of the puzzle was my grandfather's full will. My father had lied. My grandfather left me a 20% stake in the company, held in trust. My father had illegally suppressed the will, denied me my inheritance, and let my sister and her husband loot the company that was partly mine. He had stolen my daughter's future to fund her abuser's lifestyle. I now had everything, enough to ruin them 10 times over. But I didn't want to just ruin them. I wanted them to walk right into their own destruction. The annual Henderson Charity Gala was coming up. It was the peak of their social year, where my father would play the generous patriarch. It was their stage. This year, it would be mine. Arthur prepared a massive lawsuit. He also prepared a detailed report with all of Lena's evidence for the DA's office and the IRS. My job was the social takedown. I created anonymous email accounts and put together a digital package, the affair photos, the gambling statements, and a simple summary of the financial fraud. The plan was timed to the minute. The night of the gala, right when my father was scheduled to give his big speech, Arthur would file the lawsuit. A colleague would deliver the evidence package to the DA. And as my father started talking, I would hit send. The email would go to every major journalist, every guest at the gala, and everyone in Amelia and Mark's social circle. The rage was gone, replaced by a diamond-hard sense of purpose. They saw me as the meek, forgiving victim. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The night of the gala, I was in my quiet living room, watching a live feed on my laptop. On the other screen, my email was ready to go. Lily was safe, asleep in her room. At 8:15 p.m., Arthur's voice came through my earpiece. The suit is filed. It's public record. A minute later, Lena. Package delivered to the DA. The board is set, Clara. On TV, the MC was introducing my father. A man whose generosity and commitment to our city are an inspiration, Mr. Robert Henderson. My family walked on stage to thunderous applause. My father beaming, my mother covered in jewels. Amelia and Mark, the perfect couple. They stood there, soaking it all in, completely clueless. It was the highest point of their lives, and it was all about to crash and burn. My father stepped up to the podium. He started talking about integrity and legacy. The hypocrisy was almost funny. That's why Henderson and Sons Development is proud too. Click. I hit send. For a few seconds, nothing. My father kept talking, then I saw it. A single phone screen lighting up in the audience, then another, and another. A low murmur started, growing into a wave of gasps. On stage, my father faltered. The adoration in the room had vanished, replaced by a shocked silence. A journalist in the front row stood up, phone in hand. Mr. Henderson, can you comment on a multi-million-dollar fraud lawsuit filed against you and your family moments ago? My father's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Another reporter yelled, what about defrauding the city, the shell company, Apex Holdings? The reporters were swarming. The TV camera zoomed in on my father's panicked face. Mark grabbed Amelia's arm, his own face a mask of horror. He knew. Then a woman in the crowd, one of Amelia's best friends, looked up from her phone and screamed right at Amelia. "You're having an affair with the tennis pro, and you lost how much gambling." The room exploded. People were openly pointing at Amelia. She turned to Mark, but he was staring at my father in pure panic. Their perfect family unit shattered right there, under the glare of 100 smartphone cameras. On stage, my father grabbed the mic, his voice trembling with rage. "These are baseless lies, slander." But no one was listening. Then 2 men in dark suits walked calmly into the ballroom and up to the stage. They weren't reporters. They were detectives. The trap hadn't just been sprung. It had snapped shut. I closed my laptop. It was done. Falling action, the fallout. The aftermath was a glorious, cascading implosion. The Henderson catastrophe was front-page news for a week. The salacious details were just too good to resist. The legal consequences were swift. My father and Mark were arrested within 48 hours. The charges were extensive: fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. Bail was set so high they had to scramble to sell everything. The judge froze all their assets. Henderson and Sons development simply ceased to exist overnight. But the social fallout was what I savored most. The world they had built on the judgment of others turned on them with breathtaking speed. Amelia was excommunicated. Friends crossed the street to avoid her. She was kicked out of the country club. Her kids were no longer invited to the right parties. My mother was the most pathetic of all. Her entire identity was tied to the family's image. With that shattered, she had nothing. They tried to fight back. I got desperate voicemails. My mother sobbing, calling me a monster. My father from jail, promising he'd destroy me. Amelia sent unhinged texts, blaming me for ruining her children's lives, never once mentioning what she did to mine. I never responded. Their words had no power over me anymore. Their rage was the sound of their powerlessness, and it was music to my ears. Ultimately, my father and Mark took a plea deal. Dad got 5 years in a minimum security prison. Mark got 8. Amelia was financially obliterated by the divorce and my lawsuit, which awarded me my 20% stake plus significant damages. 2 years later, my life is unrecognizable. The money wasn't a jackpot, it was a restoration. It was the future my grandfather wanted for me and Lily. I bought a house in a different city, a place where no one knew the name Henderson. The most important change is in Lily. She's a happy, thriving 12-year-old. The therapy, the move, the safety, it all worked. She laughs freely now. Sometimes I watch her reading in the garden and I feel this profound sense of peace. I did it all for her, and I'd do it all again. I never spoke to my family again. I hear things sometimes. My father was released early and lives in a small, rented apartment, a bitter old man. My mother is with him. Amelia works as a cashier in a supermarket. I'm told people recognize her and whisper. They are ghosts, haunting the ruins of a life they destroyed. Do I feel guilt? Sometimes, late at night, a flicker of something, pity maybe, stirs in me. I know what I did. I destroyed a family. But then I remember my daughter's small body trembling in my arms. I remember the coldness in my mother's eyes. I remember the glint of scissors in my sister's hand. And I know I did the right thing. They built their house on a foundation of cruelty and lies. I was just the storm that revealed the rot. They thought their attack on my daughter was the end of the story. It wasn't. It was the beginning of mine. And in my new life of peace and quiet joy, I have finally, truly won. Thank you for letting me share my story. It wasn't easy, but I know a lot of you have faced betrayal from people who were supposed to protect you. If any of this sounded familiar, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What would you have done if you were me? And if you want to hear more stories about real justice, please like and subscribe. Your support helps build a space where stories like mine can be told.